People think saving money gets harder as the numbers get bigger. They assume $10,000 must be 10 times more difficult than $1,000. But anyone who has actually done it knows the opposite is true. The first $1,000 is brutal. It asks for everything while giving almost nothing back. Every $50 saved feels like a sacrifice. Every small expense feels like a setback. You're doing all the work and the balance barely responds. There's no momentum yet. No reassurance that this effort will ever turn into something meaningful. The next $10,000 doesn't work like that. It doesn't rely on constant pressure. It benefits from habits, from confidence, from money that's already there doing some of the lifting. Progress stacks instead of resetting. Most people never discover this difference because they quit at the hardest point. They assume saving itself is the problem, when in reality, they're stuck in the most unforgiving stage. Understanding why the first $1,000 fights you and why everything after gets lighter changes how you approach money entirely. The first $1,000 asks for something the next $10,000 never does: complete dependence on you. At the beginning, there is no system, no cushion, no help from accumulated progress. Every dollar has to be created manually. You don't have savings supporting you. You are the savings. When you're starting from zero, putting aside even $50 means something real has to be removed from your life. A meal out, a small comfort, a moment of relief. That trade happens immediately, while the reward stays distant. The balance inches up, but not enough to feel safe, not enough to feel meaningful. This is why the first $1,000 feels heavier than the next $10,000. Early on, progress resets constantly. One unexpected expense can erase weeks of effort. You're not building, you're defending. And defense is exhausting. Once you pass that first threshold, the equation changes. The next $10,000 doesn't start from nothing. It builds on habits that already exist. It benefits from money that stays put instead of disappearing the moment life intervenes. Each deposit adds to something stable, not fragile. People assume the difficulty scales with the number. It doesn't. It scales with how much help you have. The first $1,000 has none. The next $10,000 has structure, confidence, and momentum behind it. That's why the beginning feels so unforgiving. It's the only stage where saving relies entirely on willpower and nothing else. Your brain treats the first $1,000 and the next $10,000 as completely different challenges. Early on, saving feels like loss. Later, it feels like progress. The numbers don't change that perception, context does. When you're working toward your first $1,000, every dollar saved competes directly with something you could enjoy right now. The trade-off is immediate and obvious. You feel what you give up, but you don't feel what you gain yet. The balance is too small to change your sense of security, so your brain labels the effort as pointless. That's why the first $1,000 requires constant resistance. You're asking yourself to delay gratification over and over without proof that it works. Your brain pushes back because it's wired to favor what it can see and feel immediately. Once you move beyond that point, the next $10,000 benefits from a psychological shift. Saving no longer feels like taking something away. It feels like adding to something that already exists. You're not questioning whether saving works. You've seen it work. This change reduces friction. Decisions become easier because you're not starting from scratch every time. A skipped purchase doesn't feel like deprivation anymore. It feels like protecting progress. The difference isn't discipline, it's feedback. The first $1,000 gives almost none. The next $10,000 gives just enough to keep you going. That's why people stall early and accelerate later. Their brains aren't changing rules. They're responding to proof. The moment you cross your first $1,000, the process stops feeling theoretical. You don't have to believe saving works anymore. You've seen it. That proof is what makes the next $10,000 move faster, even if your income stays the same. Before this point, saving feels like effort without identity. You're trying to become someone who saves money, but there's no evidence to support that belief yet. Each deposit feels isolated, like it could disappear at any moment. After the first $1,000, that changes. The balance doesn't vanish the moment something unexpected happens. It bends, but it holds. That stability matters more than the number itself. It turns saving from a fragile experiment into a repeatable process. This is why the next $10,000 doesn't feel 10 times harder. You already know how to move money without breaking your life. You know what expenses are flexible and which ones aren't. You've already adjusted. More importantly, you trust yourself. That trust removes hesitation. You don't overthink every decision because you've made these decisions before and survived them. Progress compounds psychologically before it ever compounds financially. The confidence you gain at $1,000 carries forward into every future milestone. Most people never experience this shift because they stop right before it happens. They assume saving will always feel like strain, when in reality, the strain peaks at the very beginning. That's why the first $1,000 is the hardest, and why everything after it moves differently. The next $10,000 feels lighter because momentum finally enters the picture. Before your first $1,000, saving depends on constant attention. You have to notice every dollar. You have to stop yourself repeatedly. Miss one decision and progress disappears. After that threshold, the process becomes steadier. You're no longer resetting to zero. Each month adds to something that already exists. If you save $100 now, it doesn't stand alone. It joins a growing base. That stacking effect is what separates the first $1,000 from the next $10,000. Momentum also changes how setbacks feel. Early on, a $200 expense can undo weeks of work. Later, that same expense is absorbed. It slows progress, but it doesn't erase it. Recovery becomes possible without panic. This is where the math quietly starts helping you. Not in dramatic ways, but in subtle ones. Small gains show up without effort. The balance grows even when you're not actively thinking about it. That reinforcement matters. It keeps you engaged without draining you. The next $10,000 benefits from systems you didn't have before. Automatic transfers, habits you trust, decisions you've already made. You're not negotiating with yourself every time. That's why people who reach this stage rarely go backward. The process supports them now. Saving no longer feels like a test of willpower. It feels like maintenance. The first $1,000 asks you to carry everything alone. The next $10,000 carries itself forward, one step at a time. The reason the first $1,000 feels harder than the next $10,000 is simple. Most people never stay long enough to experience the shift. They judge the entire process based on the most difficult phase and assume it never changes. Early saving is deceptive. It asks for patience before it offers relief. It demands restraint without reassurance. When progress feels slow and fragile, people assume they're doing something wrong. So they stop. Not dramatically, quietly. They loosen their effort. They delay again. They tell themselves they'll restart later. What they don't realize is that the struggle they're in is temporary. It's the peak of resistance. The part where saving relies completely on effort and gives almost nothing back. Once you push past that point, the rules change. The next $10,000 doesn't require the same emotional energy. You're no longer proving that saving is possible. You've already done that. You're just repeating a process that works. People who quit early often believe others are more disciplined or luckier. They don't see that those people simply stayed through the hardest stretch. They endured the phase where saving felt unrewarding and uncertain. This misunderstanding keeps people trapped. They keep restarting from zero, which means they keep returning to the hardest stage. Every restart makes the process feel worse, not better. Reaching the easier part isn't about willpower. It's about staying long enough for effort to turn into momentum. And that only happens after the first $1,000 is behind you. By the time you're working toward the next $10,000, the challenge has changed shape. It's no longer about survival. It's about consistency. The pressure that defined the first $1,000 starts to fade because you're no longer proving something. You're extending it. At this stage, saving doesn't feel like fighting yourself every day. The habits are already in place. Money moves automatically. Decisions don't carry the same emotional weight because the outcome is familiar. You've already seen progress stack instead of collapse. The next $10,000 benefits from everything the first $1,000 taught you. You understand how long things take. You know which expenses actually matter and which ones don't. You felt the difference between panic and preparedness, and you don't want to go back. This is also where patience becomes easier. Watching the balance grow no longer feels pointless. Even slow months still feel like forward motion because the base is there. You're not starting over each time life interferes. The irony is that the number is bigger, but the effort feels smaller. Not because you're working harder, but because the system is finally doing some of the work for you. You're cooperating with momentum instead of fighting resistance. That's the part most people never reach. Not because it's exclusive or complicated, but because it sits on the other side of the hardest threshold. The first $1,000 demands belief without evidence. The next $10,000 rewards belief with proof. If you're stuck below your first $1,000, don't confuse difficulty with impossibility. That phase is harder than the next $10,000 because it asks for effort without momentum. It demands restraint before it offers stability. Nothing is wrong with you if it feels heavy. That's exactly how this stage works. Your only real job right now is to stay in it. Save what you can, $25, $50, $100, and keep going long enough for progress to stop resetting. Once that first $1,000 exists, the rules change. Habits replace force. Momentum replaces pressure. The next $10,000 won't feel easy, but it will feel manageable. Don't judge the entire journey by the hardest mile. Push through it once, and you won't have to fight it again.